Betrothed to the Mafia prince. But his father fell in love with me first. What the Mafia king did next changed everything. Sofia never imagined her life would come to this. She was 22, from a simple family in Palermo. Her father owned a small shop in the older part of the city. They were not rich, but they were fine. Until the debts came. And with the debts came the Ricci family. Everyone in Palermo knew who the Riccis were. You did not borrow money from them and then miss a payment. You did not make excuses. When they came to your door, you either settled or you paid in some other way. Sofia's father could not settle, so he came up with another plan. He sat his daughter down one afternoon and told her quietly, almost apologetically, that he had made an arrangement. She would go to the Ricci estate. She would marry Marco Ricci, the eldest son. The debt would be cleared. Sofia did not argue. She did not cry. She looked at her father for a long moment, then stood up, went to her room, and packed one bag. She told herself that was all she would give them. One bag. Nothing more. The Ricci estate sat on a hill above the city. Stone walls, iron gates, the kind of place that tells you immediately that the people inside have been powerful for a very long time. When Sofia arrived, nobody came to meet her. A staff member showed her to a room on the second floor. It was beautiful. Fresh flowers, heavy curtains, expensive everything. She set her bag on the bed and thought, a cage is still a cage, no matter how nice the furniture. She met Marco that evening at dinner. He was 27, well-dressed, relaxed in the way that only someone who has never worried about money can be. He looked at her like she was something he had already decided to keep. He asked a few questions. He did not listen to the answers. Dante Ricci sat at the head of the table, 52 years old, quiet, completely still. His face gave nothing away. During the whole dinner, he asked Sofia exactly 2 questions. She answered both of them directly, without looking down. He did not respond. But just for a moment, a second, maybe less, something moved behind his eyes. Then it was gone. Sofia noticed. She filed it away. The weeks that followed were slow and strange. Sofia was not locked up. She could walk the gardens, use the library, sit in the kitchen with the staff. But she was watched. And Marco made sure she knew it. He would appear whenever she was talking to someone. He added small rules. No going to this part of the house. No speaking to certain people without him present. It was control dressed up as routine. Quiet and constant and suffocating. Sofia said nothing and watched everything. She learned which staff were loyal to Marco and which ones just did their jobs. She noticed that Dante took his coffee alone every morning and read his papers in the same armchair every night. She was not planning anything. She was just surviving the way she always had, by paying close attention. It started so slowly that she almost missed it. Dante began showing up in the library on Tuesday afternoons. He would sit at the far table with a file or a report and say nothing. They would both just be there, in that big quiet room, and he would not look at her, but his presence always felt like it meant something. Then one night, neither of them could sleep. Sofia was in a small sitting room off the kitchen, holding a cup of tea. Dante walked in, saw her, and instead of leaving, he sat down. They talked for nearly an hour. Books. A writer he mentioned that she had not read. Then, somewhere in the middle of it, he started talking about his late wife. He said she was the only person who had never been afraid of him. Sofia looked at him and asked, "Why would that matter to you?" He stopped. He looked at her like she had said something in a language he had forgotten he once knew. The conversation moved on, but something had shifted in that room. They both felt it. Neither said so. Marco was not a stupid man. He started to notice things. The way his father walked more slowly through a room when Sofia was in it. The way Dante would repeat something she had said hours later, casually, as if he was still turning it over in his mind. He could not go at his father directly. Nobody did that with Dante Ricci. So instead he went at Sofia. More rules, stricter instructions. He wanted her beside him at every meal, speaking only when spoken to. He was not shouting or threatening. He was just pressing down, steadily, the way you press on something you want to make smaller. One morning, Dante passed Sofia in the corridor. She was walking with her eyes down, holding a book. He looked at her face. Careful, closed off. The face of someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible. He stopped. "You are not property," he said, quietly. Then he walked on. Sofia stood still in the corridor for a moment, 4 words. That was all. But they were the most honest thing anyone in that house had said to her since she arrived, and they had come from the most powerful man in the building. 3 months in, everything came apart at a family dinner. Marco had a bad week. A deal went wrong. He was drinking before they sat down. Sophia kept her eyes on her plate, but Marco needed somewhere to put his frustration, and she was right there. He said something about her father's debts, something cutting about how grateful she should be. He said it in front of everyone, 2 uncles, 3 senior men from the organization, and his father. The table went completely quiet. Dante set his fork down. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He said something to Marco, very low, very steady. Nobody else heard the exact words. But Marco went pale. He sat back. He did not speak again for the rest of the meal. People left quickly after that, making small excuses. Sophia sat alone at the long table in the silence of the room and thought, something just changed. I do not know yet if it changed in my favor, but something moved. A few days later, Dante sent word through a staff member asking if she would come to his study that evening, as though she were a person with a schedule, as though she had somewhere else she might be. His study was a room she had never been inside. Dark wooden shelves, a large desk, one window looking out over the back garden. He was standing when she came in. He told her 3 things. First, her father's debt had been cleared 6 weeks ago, fully, without conditions. Second, that meant she was free to go. No arrangement was holding her there anymore. Third, he did not want her to go. He said it plainly. No poetry, no drama. He said, I am not asking you for anything. I am telling you something that is true. What you do with it is your decision entirely. But I will not pretend to feel nothing when I do not feel nothing. Sophia stood there and looked at him. This man who had run a criminal empire for 30 years. This man who had spent his whole life behind a wall of silence and power. This man who had just spoken to her more honestly than her own father ever had. She told him she needed time to think. He nodded and said, take whatever time she needed. She walked out, stood on the terrace, and looked at the city below. For the first time since she had arrived, the decision felt like hers. Word spread through the house fast. Within days, Marco knew. He could not go at his father, so he went sideways. He had Sophia's younger sister brought from the city to the estate, not by force exactly, but in the way that family made things happen. A car, a polite suggestion, no real room to say no. It was a message. You are not as free as you think. When Sophia found out, she felt cold for a moment. Then she felt something else. A kind of calm that comes when you have been pushed far enough that you stop being afraid of what comes next. She went to Marco herself. No one told her to. She knocked on his door, and when he answered, she told him she wanted to talk. They sat down in his sitting room, and she told him everything his father had said to her, word for word. She told him she had not decided anything yet. Then she said that using her sister was a mistake, not because of what it would do between them, but because of what it would do to Marco himself. That kind of move, she told him, stays with you. Marco looked at her for a long time. Then he said, you are either the bravest person I have ever met, or the most foolish. Sophia said, I am neither. I am someone with very little left to lose. Her sister went home the next morning. But something between Marco and his father was broken after that. Not loudly, quietly, the way the most serious breaks always happen, under the surface, until one day the wall just gives. 2 weeks later, Dante called a formal meeting with the senior men of the family. Sophia heard about it through the staff. He announced that Marco would take over the running of all operations. Immediately. Completely. Dante was stepping back. Nobody said anything out loud. But everyone in that room understood. The most powerful man any of them had ever known had decided, somewhere along the way, that power was not the only thing worth having. Sophia took her own 2 weeks to think. She walked the grounds each morning. She wrote letters to her sister. She sat in the library and did not read anything, just sat. Then she went back to Dante's study and knocked. She told him she had one condition. She said, I will never be introduced as anyone's anything. Not your partner, not your companion, not anyone's arrangement. I am Sophia. That is who I am, and it does not change for anyone. He looked at her and said, I know exactly who you are. That is the entire point. And she stayed. 7 years later, Sophia and Dante were living quietly on the Amalfi Coast. Marco ran the family business now, and ran it well, better than most people expected. He and his father still shared a last name and occasionally the same room at Christmas, which was the most that could be said between them. Sophia had started a small program helping women in the local villages learn to read and write. It began with 6 women in the back room of a community center. By the time she was 29, it had a building, a waiting list, and more women than she could serve in a year. A small newspaper ran a short piece on her work. The writer asked how she had ended up on the coast. Sophia thought for a moment, and then said, "I was brought somewhere I did not choose, and then I chose to stay." Dante read the article that same morning. He read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in the top drawer of his desk, the same desk where he had once told her she was free to go. He never told her he had kept it. She found it years later, after he was gone. She sat with it in her hands for a long time. One small folded piece of paper. And she understood something she had not fully understood before. That a man who had built his entire life on power had kept one small, quiet piece of softness, and had never once asked to be thanked for it. She folded it back exactly the way he had left it, and she put it back in the drawer. End